Thanks for joining us.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community. Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Some of the greatest, most influential minds in our community. You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. I'm Zev Brenner. You know, the Orthodox Jews, the Jewish community played a very pivotal role in the selection of Donald J. Trump as the next president of the United States of America. To analyze that, the Jewish Vote, the Orthodox Jewish Vote, Yaakov M. is a senior editor at VINNEWS. He has a popular podcast by the name of Yaakov M. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, as an avid listener for many years, it's a pleasure to finally be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I follow what you're doing on VINNEWS, some great stories. So here's the interesting thing. You go to some Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods, Square, you have other area, Lakewood. What did you have in Square was 99.9% of the vote went for Donald Trump. Who was the point? Yeah. Who was the point off? Who got that?
Who's the point one? Some JFK voter who's still around, who voted in 1950 something, and back when the Democrat was the party of the Jews. It's very bizarre. Who snuck in?
So we have data from Borough Park, from Williamsburg, Lakewood, other heavily solid Orthodox Jewish areas.
It's staggering. The data. Well, I've seen data from Kiryas Yoel. I've seen data, as you said, from Ramapo. I believe it's harder in some of the, those areas are easier because those areas are so heavily concentrated with Jewish population in general. Whereas once you get to Queens and Brooklyn and the 5 boroughs, it gets harder because you have to kind of, weed out the Jews. A lot of times, I lived in Queens for many years. There were a lot of Jews and a lot of non-voting, non-Jewish voters all in the same precincts. My understanding is from all the data they've compiled, the Orthodox Jew, by the way, even before the election, they did all sorts of polls. A lot of these, from organizations, religious organizations did polls, and they found that the Haredi world was in the 90s. The modern Orthodox world, have people self-described, was slightly more divided, but heavily. I mean, way beyond anything we've ever seen.
No, absolutely. And I think the last election that we did polling on the Orthodox vote was like 85 or 90% for Donald Trump 4 years ago. I think it's even more solid today. There was more of an excitement, I felt. There were trucks going around in Yiddish and in Hasidic neighborhoods saying, vote for Donald Trump, etc. Even the Satmar Rebbe in Kiryas upstate in KJ basically said, vote for Donald Trump because you can't vote for Kamala Harris, which is unusual.
Oh, very unusual. Yeah, the Yiddish trucks and everything else. It shows us. I mentioned this and on my show, and this is actually quoted in VINNEWS, an article, which is that it shows you really how extreme the Jews have not changed, and the Orthodox Jews and the values that we care about deeply have been as consistent as can be. Obviously, Israel is a very, very strong issue, and obviously the war in Gaza, the attack, and the Hamas massacre. But I really think that's a symbol, symbolic. It's more of a symptom because there are so many family values, and then you talk about just raising families and the struggles that we have financially, and the crime surge. And I think that what the Frum community saw unanimously is that 15, 20, 25 years ago, a President Clinton and even a President Obama, even though there were leanings that got us concerned, the quality of life overall, I'm not saying that I supported Obama, I did not, but it wasn't black and white. It was a gray area, and people felt, okay, Democrat Party, versus now where Israel is what says it all, weapons, arms embargo, and all the different things, and all the ultimatums to Netanyahu. But that was just symbolic of the fact that the leftist values have just hijacked the Democrat Party.
Well, I think what you mentioned about the modern Orthodox versus the Haredi Jewish community. In the Haredi Jewish community, the interesting thing, Israel was first and foremost, yes, they're concerned about immigration. Yes, they're concerned about crime. Yes, they're concerned about inflation. But Israel is an overriding thing. In some more modern Orthodox circles that are more liberal, they tend to look more also as to, social issues, which has made them vote Democratic.
Yeah, and I don't know if social issues, if that means abortion, which obviously is a very contentious and a very divisive issue everywhere, but amongst everyone. I mean, I did find that interesting, and I come from certainly a more modern background and upbringing. It's interesting because once Israel's the top of the line issue, I thought it was pretty black and white. I don't think there's any doubt at this point about where the support for Israel comes from. Once Chuck Schumer said what he said, and he was basically the one that we gripped, the one that we hung on the most as the Shomer, right? As the person who was going to have Israel's back. Once that happened, it wasn't like you had Elon Omar, or even Nancy Pelosi. It was Chuck Schumer. Social issues. Look, there's always going to be that divide. There are literally people out there who are, let's say in the non-Jewish world or the secular world, who are fiscally conservative, and and they're even worried about crime, and they're even worried about the border. And yet social issues, let's call it, abortion, becomes like their number one issue. So yeah, there are these like one issue voters out there. That's why it's just always so unpredictable.
No, it certainly is, and it's just interesting to hear because those that, and I was surprised in some of the more modern Orthodox community that were voting for Kamala Harris were very vehemently so opposed to Trump. So I'm not sure if there's so much supporting the Democrats or just so hated Trump so much, because you did see that. I did see that. Quite a few people that I've come across. We did a show. Somebody, and it goes both ways. Somebody called me a mullick for interviewing a Democrat debating a Republican. So
I saw that. I actually saw that. And by the way, it's a great point, because we see this again. The Jewish world is a reflection of the secular world, which is that some people, they see Trump, they see the nicknames that he calls people, the Sleepy Joe, and they call it the nasty tweets, and they feel like he's a bully. And look, I'm not saying that he's the type of person that you want to marry into your family, but they see that, and that's somehow over. I try to explain to people, most politicians that we have voted for in our lifetime are not tzaddikim. I mean, we could go through a long list of Republicans and Democrats. By the way, it was true 200 years ago back in Europe, where our ancestors, our grandparents and great-grandparents, they voted for the person whose policies were the most in line with what we need. They did not vote for the guy with the best midos or the person who was an angel. So you're right. Some people, like, they're just so turned off and put off, but I think it's misguided. I really don't think that that's generally how, the rational way to think.
By the way, I pointed out that I think it was in the 80s, maybe it was the 90s, where you had a congressman who was arrested for molesting boys in Williamsburg, and he got the Hasidic vote because he brought home, I hate to use the expression, brought home the bacon, but he brought home, the money to the community. So despite the fact, and again, we're talking about a long time ago, today it's more, it doesn't raise eyebrows as much as it did 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Right. Interesting. And again, I would encourage anyone to ask their Rav, or, that's definitely a question for big people. But yeah, look, it's certainly a very good point. At the end of the day, what you're voting for is you're voting for the needs of our community, of our society. We need to exist. We need to thrive. And, their personal life is just really not the thing that is going to matter after Election Day when they're in office.
Correct. But that's the thing that people say. How can you vote? People who are non-Orthodox will say to you, how can you vote for a candidate who's not morally fit or has all these issues that are troubling him, or that how could we do? And again, people say you're not voting for Chief Rabbi, you're voting for somebody who's going to pull it. And by the way, I always like to quote the Gemara. The Gemara says when you have an elected, first of all, elected official is always going to sin. The nasa yechata, when a leader sins, but you have to have, I think, you have to have monkeys on your back. If I believe that's the expression in the Gemara, it's skeletons in your closet. It's the English equivalent in order to be a leader. So it goes back thousands of years.
That's exactly what
I think it's a rats on your back or a monkey on you. I'm trying to remember the exact language that's used.
It's skipping my mind. But worms, you have to have it's at this moment I'm blanking, but that's exactly right. It's a can of worms, basically. Skeletons in your closet. Yes.
Absolutely. So we're voting people who are going to perform and do things. And I think during the first Trump administration, there were so many Orthodox Jews that worked for him. I just saw Rabbi Silk last night, who was a Hasidic man with the full regalia. He was honored by a Jew in the city. He was there, and you have other former Jews. In fact, there was a minyan every day. There was glad kosher food. There was a sukkah. There was a whole different environment in the White House, which I think may be replicated this time around.
when you I mean, as things are going right now, it's even more. It's on steroids this time around. When you go through, obviously, we know David Friedman, Jared Kushner. I mean, literally, I always say the man who brokered the Abraham Accords, and is a Shomer Torah Mitzvah, an Orthodox Jew, as is his wife, and he's somebody. He's not, he doesn't have, call it the Trump toxicity, where he's out there and he's making trouble. The man is a gem of a person. His number two, his right-hand man, Jared Kushner, they met, I believe, at a Pesach hotel. Avi Berkowitz was literally, the two of them architected the historic deal between Bahrain and the UAE, between all these Gulf Arab nations and Israel, which helped the Jews in Israel an enormous amount. Trump freed Sholem Rubashkin. He did not release Sholem Rubashkin because it was beneficial to him politically. It's because Alan Dershowitz came into President Trump, and just like Trump did for black people, by the way, and said, this man is being treated unfairly. And President Trump said, I don't let people be treated unfairly. So you talk about somebody who, and obviously he has a lot of close connections with all the real estate and everything else. He's somebody who, Trump is about getting results. Trump is about, he wants to help as much. And look, he's a politician, like you said. So every politician obviously has a lot going on. But I don't think anybody doubts that if he feels it's the right thing to do, he does it. And we've been enormously beneficiary of that.
We're speaking, we're looking at the presidential results and what it means to the Orthodox Jewish community. Yaakov M. is the senior editor of VINNEWS. Thus is nice. VINNEWS also has a popular podcast. So there are many Jews that are going to be part of it, even though I think there's a disappointment that David Friedman was not appointed ambassador to Israel. From what I heard is that it was a political thing, that Shelley Adelson's wife, basically Miriam, was told the president that she wanted Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee's terrific. I was with him in Israel. He's fantastic. But I'm disappointed that David Friedman didn't get that post back, and I know he wanted to maybe be UN ambassador to the United Nations, which he didn't get either.
So let me respond to that. And David Friedman was phenomenal. And obviously the embassy move was very contentious. Now it turns out in retrospect to have been, in hindsight, a great move. He was, heavily involved in that. He did tremendous things. And I read something different. I read that David Friedman did not want something abroad. He wanted something where he could be local and stay in Washington, D.C. So we still have to wait and see. There's other appointments to be made, obviously not an ambassadorship. But I just want to mention, and I don't know, Miriam Adelson, what you just described, that's interesting. I had not heard
I've been told. Again, these are not, I haven't been able to verify, but I've heard that from people in the know.
Mrs. Adelson certainly has an awful lot of clout, as she should, because, I mean, without her, it's possible Trump would not have won, without her and all of her incredible help. But I just want to mention, somebody pointed out to me, my friend Moshe Hill, political columnist, he, the fact that we have Mike Huckabee in there is beneficial. And I love David Friedman and not only admire him, he's phenomenal. And so this has nothing to do with reflection on him, but just having a non-Jew. Mike Huckabee is more Zionist than Bibi Netanyahu. Mike Huckabee says you can't use the word settlement. It's not a settlement. You live there. It's a neighborhood. It's your homeland. He says it's not West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. Mike Huckabee says things that almost we could never say, and it's coming from the lens of a Christian. So it's not like evangelical, and somebody who's been, like you said, an enormous friend and somebody you know personally. So it's actually much better for the Jews from a PR standpoint to have a non-Jew saying those kinds of talking points than it is if a Jew says it.
Something ordinarily you'd be right, but I think David Friedman was so passionate. He wasn't afraid to speak. And there still is a certain, thing that the person who lives it being Jewish is different, a little different. And Mike Huckabee is wonderful. He speaks up for the Judea and Samaria, and I was with him, and he's not afraid to take people to task as a non-Jew. People respect it. But David Friedman also has a gravitas because he's so passionate about it. So I do miss the fact that he won't be the ambassador to Israel. I do hope he gets another position. I don't know what all the machinations. I'm sure there's a lot. From what I heard, there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
Look at the last week here. I mean, I can't keep up. Every time I put my phone down for 2 minutes, I miss another appointment, and then it's going to be 3 later before I try to have to go and catch up. He is coming in, President Trump, so prepared. We've never had a president in over 100 years who already did the job, left, then came back. So he is as prepared as any human being on the planet could ever be. It's fascinating to watch. And, we got this appointment, ambassador to the UN, Elise Stefanik. And, I know you mentioned something to me. Well, we'll let you get to it about Dov Hikind. But
looking at that, people, Dov Hikind is slated. He's a possible person who could be the charge of anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism czar for the administration.
I mean, that would be epic. That would be absolutely life-changing for us Jews. And I'll tell you why. Because number one, I always say, Dov, and I've known him for quite a while. You know him, I think, for quite a long time. Dov Hikind, first of all, I wish I had the energy when I was 30 that he has at his age, constantly traveling. I mean, constantly he's showing up at rallies and organizing rallies. But, what's amazing about Dov Hikind is, and I'm sure people are aware of this, is he could be one of the big reasons Trump won Pennsylvania. Now, in the end, it turns out that even if Trump loses Pennsylvania, I mean, he swept it. I mean, he swept the whole blue wall is the red wall. He won every single swing state. I mean, he just eclipsed the popular vote. So it turns out Pennsylvania, but back 3 weeks ago when Pennsylvania was do or die. So what did Hikind do? Dov Hikind, he put up billboards throughout Pennsylvania, literally targeting Jews, secular Jews. And he said, you've got to vote for this man. Trump. Dov is so outspoken. And yeah, he definitely deserves it. And he does it lishma. He's so sincere. He's so genuine. I know for a fact things that he's done for IDF soldiers, for different people, that he doesn't talk about, that he doesn't put on Twitter, on X. And he does it because he cares. I don't know anybody who cares as deeply about the Jewish people as Dov Hikind. No exaggeration.
He's in Israel right now. I just spoke to him a little while ago. So I heard the rumors where he might be the anti-Semitism czar. Certainly would be a great choice that he done. So
wow.
Well, I'm curious, though, and you mentioned Dov put money, he bought billboards in Pennsylvania, which was helpful. The RJC, Republican Jewish Coalition, put in $15 million, a record amount. They had some great commercials that they played to get out the Jewish vote. And I think the Jewish vote did go out. The numbers will be released. But I'm curious, according to the RJC, only 32% of American Jews voted for Donald Trump. For me, it seemed that the numbers probably should be higher. I wonder if it's going to be adjusted because, yes, in places like New York and California and Chicago, the liberal places, the Jewish vote then went definitely for the Democrats. But in the other parts of the country, you probably have a more even split between those who voted for Donald Trump or for Kamala Harris.
Zev, I'll tell you, first, an interesting point, but I'll get back to it, a tidbit about that commercial, one specific commercial that took place in the deli, but we'll get back to that. It never ceases to amaze me that Jews will vote against their own best interests, and we talk about secular Jews. So I want to be very, very clear. Trump said many times, he said Jews have to have their head examined, and he got a lot of flack for it. And putting those comments aside, what he meant that, if a black person would vote for a KKK, just to use like an extreme analogy, that person has to have their head examined. That's not an insult to the person. That's actually a compliment. Like, you're probably normal. So why you? So the point is, Jews, it's almost like a religion to secular Jews. And we know this, where vote Democrat or like they feel guilty, Jewish guilt, like they're doing something wrong. But now with things so extreme with Israel, obviously Kamala's husband, Doug Emhoff, is Jewish. So they were using that as a talking point. I'm sure some Jews fell for that. But think about this, right? We know that women in the country over at large, not Jewish women voted for Kamala overwhelmingly, and a big part of that is because of abortion. That becomes the number one issue. You don't have any secular Jewish women out there, no matter what they see with Israel and with Gaza and everything else, they'll figure out a way to rationalize, listen, I can't vote for this guy because they buy into the fact he's going to ban abortion. And it's not something I can relate to because we know as Jews, as religious Jews, that hurting a fetus is basically tantamount to murder. But this is how they kind of like they don't go to shul on Shabbos. So we're talking about, I don't know the numbers, but a couple of million of secular Jews, 1.5 million, whatever the numbers are, 32%. It tells you that no matter how far things go. Look, after Trump moved the embassy, he said that he heard from a lot of evangelicals. He didn't hear from a lot of Jews in terms of fan, response. Thank you, Mr. President, for this move. Now, obviously, there's a lot more evangelicals in the world than there are Jews. But you're right. It's fascinating. Just a tidbit on that commercial, which you're talking about, where 4 Jews are sitting in a deli in Philadelphia saying, Trump, I'm a Democrat. I don't know. Oh, no, vote for him. He's strong on Israel. They called that, the RJC called that the permission vote. And what the strategy was, listen, you may not love Trump. You may not think he's a good guy. You don't want him as your neighbor. You may think his tweets are toxic. You have permission to vote for him anyway, even if you don't feel comfortable because it's the right thing to do. And they say that was very effective.
It was very effective, and the irony is that deli was a non-kosher deli, but it was boycotted by Democrats who said, hey, you shot a Trump commercial there? We ain't using you. So, which I believe the deli later, I believe, let them use it for a Kamala Harris commercial. I believe so, if I remember correctly.
I saw the Kamala. It was very fake. It was much more artificial. It wasn't well done, but yes, that's how That's how rattled they were by that commercial, and it did the trick.
It was a great commercial. Our guest, Yaakov M., senior editor of VINNEWS, has a very popular newscast dealing with politics and other Jewish affairs. I like, and I'm sure you're going to be covering it, is the fact that a lot of the appointees, we mentioned Mike Huckabee and Elisa Fonig and others, Marcus Rubio, etc., very pro-Israel, terrific. Matt Gaetz, who's going to be selected for the Attorney General's position, is someone who has a history where he's made anti-Semitic tropes regarding to the fact that a bill never got out of the House for defining anti-Semitism. One of the things that are defined is saying that Jews killed Jesus, and he said you can't vote for it because that would make the Bible under suspicion because they say the Jews killed Jesus. So upsetting.
Look, number one, I'll get to the comments in a second. Number one, first point is that, like you said, Trump overwhelmingly, Marco Rubio, like you said, Stefanik, Nikki Haley, let's go back to the first term, Nikki Haley and David Friedman, as I said earlier, Jared Kushner. Trump has been Mike Pompeo. There's almost nobody as pro-Israel out there as Mike Pompeo. So Trump has surrounded himself, first and second term, with people who are pro-Israel. Now, Matt Gaetz, Attorney General, so it's not related to Israel at all, and it's not even something that directly relates to a lot of Jewish issues. The comments,
if Jews chooses being guilty of killing their Lord, basically speaks that we can't use that as a definition of anti-Semitic because then the Bible will have a problem. And who's what the Bible says, which is the New Testament that says the Jews killed their Lord. So having an Attorney General is something which I think is a problem.
The comments bothered me. I'm certainly not going to defend the comments. What I will tell you about, I'm very reluctant to throw around the word anti-Semitism. You want anti-Semitism? We've got Ilhan Omar. We got it on the Republican side too. People who have made like really, really vicious comments. So there are people out there who are very, very strongly anti-Semitic, and it's very clear. Rashida Tlaib and the like. Making these kinds of comments when you're from a certain background and when you represent a certain element of the people, not condoning it. I'm not defending it in any way. I'm very reluctant as Jews that we should go and use the word anti-Semitism. We could say that
I didn't call him an anti-Semite, but I'm troubled by the remarks he made about the Jews killing his Lord.
Yeah, look, the remarks are troubling. There's Tucker Carlson. There are people
on
the conservative side of things who they come from an evangelical background and they have a perspective that is very, very controversial and that some people call anti-Semitic. Matt Gaetz was chosen, and we have to see because he's a controversial pick, not for other reasons where, right. Some Republicans are already saying behind the scenes they're not going to support him. Matt Gaetz was chosen for one reason, because Trump was burned the first time around by his attorneys general who didn't defend him against a lot of the very, very fake investigations. And he needs somebody that he can trust who's gonna just face enormous. Any attorney general under Trump is going to face pressure like we cannot imagine and not cave and buckle under the pressure. And Matt Gaetz is the type of person, and that kind of goes with the package. Not defending him, but he was chosen for reasons totally unrelated to these types of comments or even his legislative history in general. But yes, there's no question that there's a very tiny but outspoken contingent of the Republican Party who has borderline neo-Nazi or borderline anti-Semitic viewpoints, and that is concerned. With that said, I'd like to hear Matt Gaetz defend himself, and I'm not ready at this point to say that his appointment troubles me. And let's see if he even gets confirmed.
Oh, I don't know if we're going to address that issue. It did come out at a time when the vote for anti-Semitism was going through the House, never made it to the Senate, and to define what anti-Semitism is. And he was on record, I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene also had the same kind of comments regarding that. And, while I understand we're saying, well, you're saying the Bible could be censored for being anti-Semitic, but it means that's what they believe. And you can have that belief, but have a public personality in such an important position, having belief that the Jews killed their Lord, I think is problematic.
Yeah, there were details in the wording there that I'm not recalling right now. I agree. It's I remember at the time I was very troubled. It was a very, very black. Again, they were pandering to their base, who certainly has a lot of mischaracterizations. Not defending it at all. It did trouble me. But again, that I don't feel like that's the main focus. But obviously that's something not to minimize.
Reminds me of a joke. If a Jewish fellow walking down the street, then the guy starts beating him up and goes, "Why are you beating me up?" He goes, "You killed our lawyer. You killed your lawyer. That was 2,000 years ago. I just found out about it this morning." So it's something which is something that we have to talk about. In a few moments remaining, and I know that the Jewish vote has been important. What I found interesting is that when they portrayed the votes for Donald Trump in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens, they mentioned Latinos, blacks. They didn't mention Jews in their tally, because I think Jews, especially in places like Brooklyn, good spots of Brooklyn, including Queens, went for Donald Trump. That made a big difference in the overall boroughs vote for the president.
Yeah, who's the they? I mean, you mean
the media,
like
the
Trump
media.
campaign? The media
when they trumpeted and they said, the Brooklyn did better and the Bronx and the Queens did better, is then they mentioned because the black vote, more blacks voted for Donald Trump and more Latinos voted for Donald Trump. But they should have noticed, and because Jews, especially in Brooklyn, in certain areas, play such a big role. Borough Park, Flatbush, Crown Heights, Williamsburg, these are solid areas. We have a big Jewish vote, and I think the fact that so many Orthodox Jews voted for Donald Trump also helped lift the borough's vote for the president.
Oh, big time. And obviously the popular vote, which is giving him a mandate, and New Jersey is now almost a swing state, heavy Jewish vote there. I don't know. I'll tell you, there's a blessing in disguise. There's a silver lining to that, which is that, people always somehow tend to blame the Jews. Whichever side is the side that we're not on, we'll figure out a way to blame us. So if they make a big deal out of the Jewish vote and people don't like Trump, let's blame the Jews. So there kind of is, if Trump had lost, then they were already setting up a lot of Republicans, to blame the Jews. Trump himself made comments that, people were concerned about to that effect. So, like, I'm not crying over it. It is interesting. You'd think that the media, you know what it is? I mean, I have to guess. The media was absolutely shocked. The Hispanic vote rocked, and this is not related to our Jewish community, but the 45% Hispanic vote for Trump, which has not happened, basically since Reagan, and they were in their back pocket. The Democrats were under this total misconception that if you open up the border and flood the country with migrants, then the Hispanics are going to respect you. And what they forgot is Hispanics, number one, are in the highest crime areas. Hispanics, number two, need to also pay the rent and buy a loaf of bread. So the Hispanic vote, Trump did things historically with the Hispanic and even the black vote. So I think the media kind of got swept up in that, and the Jews, Israel, Gaza, it kind of like became a little bit more. And again, it's the Orthodox Jews. It's not, if 50% of the Jews had voted for Trump, it certainly would have been a huge story. Because it's in the 30s and because it was mostly the Orthodox community, it just simply, there was just way too much overshadowing it. But it is interesting. I'm not sure myself.
Biden said that the vote and the war in Gaza had an impact on the election. Absolutely not. It was so low in the total. Well, people vote the economy, they vote inflation, they vote for the pocketbooks and crime.
It's funny, and exactly, which is why the last few weeks I predicted, I really thought Trump was going to win. A funny story, back in Gaza when they elected Hamas the first time around, which was in 06, whenever it was, when Bush was president, they did exit polls asking people their number one concern, and it was the economy, it was finances in Pakistan, where there's terror attacks all the time, and there are wars with Pakistan and India and Bangladesh. They ask people, it's always the same. People, like you said, what they call the kitchen table issues. And generally, if you look back at almost every presidential election, if the economy is strong, I don't mean the economy is strong, these bogus key indicators of whatever the media use to decide that the economy is strong. The economy is terrible. But if loaf of bread is a fortune and people are not getting wages that they want and paying too much taxes, they vote for the other side. It's as simple as that. It doesn't change, Zev.
And that's interesting. Nassau County went solidly for Donald Trump, except one place did not. Long Beach went Democratic. Interesting. A lot of Jews in Long Beach.
That's your place, yeah.
I was just surprised. Of all the places in Nassau County, that's the only place that went solidly Democratic.
Did not know that.
Yeah, I just saw that in the news the other day. I found it interesting. It requires more analysis, but people are shocked when I tell them that. But this was the statistics. So statistics never lie, right, Yaakov?
I think Mark Twain felt otherwise.
Anyway, we appreciate you being here with us. Thank you. What's your next story going to be about in VINNEWS and your podcast?
This was amazing. Well, we're talking heavily about Matt Gaetz. I mean, that is going to be, and what you brought up, that there's no question that's a huge topic of discussion. I also saw Cassie Akiva. I don't know if you know, she's a journalist, she writes for Daily Wire. She's a Giorist. Her name is Cassie Akiva now, and she was in like an MIT. She's taking some kind of course, and the professor was literally spewing anti-Semitism, talking about why, basically being pro-Israel, being anti-Israel is not anti-Semitism, some silly stuff like that. She broke that on X a few hours ago, so we're going to cover that.
Terrific. Anyways, I look forward to having you back and keep on the wonderful work that you're doing.
Please. It's been a thrill. Oh, same to you. Thank you for everything you do for Kaleidoscope, Zev.
Thank you. Yaakov M., senior editor at VINNEWS, also a very popular podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.
On Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.